The waitress had just set the coffee down when she froze. It wasn't because of a customer complaint. It wasn't because the cup had cracked. It was because the man sitting across from her was the father of the child she had raised alone for the past 12 years. A single name on the receipt: Daniel Whitmore. With just one glance, she knew it was him, the man who once held her hand by the ocean and promised forever. The man who vanished without a word, right when she needed him the most. That morning, Café Soleil was packed office workers, business people, investors. Amid the sound of whirring espresso machines and overlapping conversations, Sophie Alvarez moved from table to table with a calm expression she had perfected over the last 5 years. She wore a worn brown apron, her hair tied neatly in a bun, her steps quick but composed. No one here knew she was a single mother, raising her 12-year-old son on her own. Order number 7. Marco's voice rang out from behind the counter. Sophie picked up the tray and walked toward the table by the window. Sunlight slanted through the glass, casting a glow across the face of the man scrolling through his phone. Sophie glanced down at the receipt again. His name was right there, clear, bold, all caps: Daniel Whitmore. She froze, her heart pounding like war drums. Her hand trembled slightly as she placed the first cup down. "Americano, for you." The sentence cut off midway. He looked up, those deep blue eyes, the sharp jawline, the tousled brown hair. Everything was the same, just softened by a few lines of age. It was him. There was no doubt. Daniel Whitmore, the young man who once said, "I don't care about fame. I don't care about my father's company. I only want you." And now, here he was, phone in hand, wearing a tailored shirt. And he didn't recognize her. "Is something wrong?" he asked, polite, but distant. Sophie took a step back. "No, nothing. Would you like anything else?" "Not yet. Thank you." And just like that, he went back to his phone. She turned away, swallowing the lump rising in her throat. To him, she was just another waitress with tired eyes and calloused hands. He didn't recognize her, but her son was his mirror image. 12 years ago, she had stood at the gate of his family's estate, her belly swollen, just days from giving birth, holding a box filled with letters, dozens of them. Not a single reply. An older woman in a sleek grey suit had come out to meet her, her hair silver, her voice cold. She handed Sophie a check. "You should disappear, for my son's sake, for the honor of the Whitmore name." Sophie didn't take the money, but she walked away not out of fear, but because in her hands she already held a life worth everything. A little boy named Liam, with deep blue eyes and a mess of brown hair, just like Daniel. Every time Liam asked, "Mum, who's my dad?" she would simply smile and say, "You don't need anyone else. You've got me." But this morning, the moment Daniel walked into the cafe, the world Sophie had spent over a decade building began to tremble. What if he had never received the letters? What if he never knew he had a son? What if it had all been a calculated lie, orchestrated by the powerful family behind him? Sophie didn't want to answer those questions, But someone else was growing up and starting to ask questions that couldn't be ignored. Liam, the boy, had already begun his search for the truth. And when that truth finally comes to light, it won't just change Liam's life, it will bring down an entire empire. San Diego. March, those days of soft sunlight and wind that moved like whispers from a past that had never truly gone to sleep. Café Soleil, a morning stop for suited executives and tie-clad businessmen. No one paid attention to the quiet waitress with her hair neatly tied back, her shirt buttoned all the way to the collar, a woman who once dreamed beside a rich young man. Sophie Alvarez, 30 years old, had worked here for 5 years. Not because she loved it, but because the cafe sat in the heart of the financial district close to Liam's school. Close to home. And more importantly, she had once heard that Daniel Whitmore, her former love, now the CEO of the billion-dollar empire Whitmore Global, often held meetings in the towers nearby. She had never dared step into his world, only stood from a distance across the street and quietly wondered if he had known I was pregnant back then. Would he have stayed that day? The cafe was busier than usual. Sophie was wiping down a table when Marco called out, "Order 7 table by the window, 2 espressos and an Americano." She picked up the receipt. Everything seemed routine until her eyes landed on one name, Daniel Whitmore. She couldn't breathe. Her grip tightened on the tray. Her heart pounded wildly in her chest. She walked toward the table. He was sitting there, dark hair, piercing blue eyes, fingers gliding over his phone as if commanding the world from his palm. He never even looked up. "Espresso for you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Daniel responded with a quick, "Thanks," never once lifting his eyes from the screen. And then the memories crashed in, the scent of salt in the ocean air, his promise, "I'll take care of you," their kisses beneath swaying palm trees, and finally the last text message I have to fly back to New York. "My father passed away. Wait for me." Okay. After that came a silence that lasted a lifetime. Daniel left the cafe 30 minutes later. He hadn't recognized her, but Sophie knew he was Liam's father, and he was now living the life she once thought they would build together. That evening, back at her small apartment in a low-rent neighborhood, Sophie stood in the kitchen preparing dinner. A soft click at the door. "I'm home." "Mom," came Liam's voice. 12 years old, tall and lean, bright eyes and messy hair, a living reflection of Daniel. "How was your day?" she asked, keeping her tone steady. "Mr. Garcia thinks I should enter the science fair," he said, excitement in his voice. "I'm building a wind turbine model that runs on renewable energy." Sophie smiled. "He's right. That project of yours is really smart." But then, Liam paused, his face a mix of hope and hesitation. "Can I ask you something?" "Mom?" She nodded. "About my dad?" The air in the kitchen seemed to hold its breath. "Have you ever thought about telling me the full story? I'm not a little kid anymore." "Mum." Sophie stood still. She had rehearsed a dozen versions of what she might one day say. But when your child looks at you with that gaze, no script survives. All she could say was, "Your father was someone I loved deeply. But things aren't as simple as you might think." Liam didn't argue. He simply nodded, then walked quietly into his room where a half-finished wind turbine model sat beside an old photograph. Tucked away in a drawer his mother thought he never opened. Two teenagers laughing on a beach. One of them was the man who had walked into the cafe that morning and unknowingly stirred a past Sophie had buried for 12 long years. Tomorrow, Daniel would come back to the cafe. Sophie could feel it in her bones, but the question was no longer, "Will he remember that he once loved me?" It was now, "Do I have the courage to face him not as an ex-lover, but as the mother of his son 12 years ago, senior summer, those final days of being 18, wild and radiant?" Back then, Sophie Alvarez was a girl with deep purple hair, silver hoops in her ears, a love for sarcasm, and a laugh that echoed through late-night bonfires. Daniel Whitmore was nothing like her. He was the heir to a dynasty, 3 generations of men running Whitmore Global. He had shown up at the La Jolla summer retreat simply because, as he put it, he wanted to escape another one of his mother's boring galas. Sophie remembered the first night they really talked beneath a sky full of stars, when Daniel slipped his hand across the gap between their sleeping bags and whispered, "Do you think it's possible to fall in love after just 3 hours of conversation?" She giggled. "No. But I do think someone can make you forget you're supposed to be cautious." And Daniel did just that. He took her to watch the sunrise at a secret cove. He sang off-key while riding her around on a rented Vespa from the harbour. He told her how he didn't want to major in business, how he wanted to become a renewable energy systems designer. "I don't care what my dad built," he said one night. "You know what I care about you. You're the only thing that makes me feel alive." She believed him enough to give him everything. The summer days passed quickly like waves crashing against the shore, and then Daniel's father died suddenly. A heart attack, right after a tense boardroom meeting. Daniel disappeared. No calls, no messages. 2 weeks of silence. Then, finally, one last text: "I have to fly back to New York for the funeral. Wait for me. It'll only be a few days." So she waited. 1 week. 2 weeks. Then 3 months. And then a sign she couldn't mistake. She was pregnant. Sophie called. She sent letters. She even went to his family's estate in Pacific Heights. She stood outside the gate for an hour. When the security guard finally brought out an elegant silver-haired woman, Sophie clenched her hands against her stomach as if to shield the life growing inside. "Daniel doesn't want to see you," the woman said coldly. He needs to know about this," Sophie whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "No, he doesn't, and you'll receive adequate compensation to disappear." A sealed envelope was offered, but Sophie looked at it as if it were an insult. "My child is not something you can buy." The woman smiled a chilling smile so cold it seemed to drain the sunlight from the afternoon, and turned away. That day, Sophie returned to her tiny rented room, crumpled the envelope and tossed it into the trash. She knew she no longer had a choice, but she still had one thing worth holding on to: her child. Liam was born on New Year's Day. There was no one by her side, no Daniel, no mother, just a kind OB-GYN from a free clinic and her own trembling hands. And then the days came, one after another. Sophie did whatever she could to survive: waiting tables, tutoring kids, working night shifts at a data center. But no matter what, she never left San Diego. Not because she couldn't afford to move, but because a small, stubborn part of her still believed, if Daniel truly didn't know, if one day he came back, she wanted him to have the chance to recognize his son. And then, that morning, when she saw the name Daniel Whitmore printed on the receipt, every question from the past 12 years suddenly became real. He was alive, more successful than ever, and he had no idea about the child who carried the exact same eyes as him. The next morning, Sophie woke earlier than usual, not because of her shift at Café Soleil, but because of a feeling she couldn't quite name. A restlessness, like something inevitable was about to happen. Not something bad, but something that could no longer be avoided. 7:55 a.m. The cafe's wind chime jingled gently. The first customer of the day stepped in: a tall man wearing a grey shirt under a suit jacket. No tie. She turned, and her heart stopped. Daniel Whitmore. For the second time. This time, he was alone. No assistance. No laptop. Just his eyes scanning the room until they landed on an old table, table 7 by the window. Sophie stood frozen behind the counter, trying to hide herself behind the espresso machine, but it was too late. His eyes flicked toward her and paused for a beat. Then he gave a small nod. Sophie. Her co-worker. Denise whispered beside her, "Is that him?" "Yeah," she replied. Eyes locked on his silhouette. "You want me to serve him?" Sophie slowly shook her head. "No, I'll do it." She stepped toward the table, took a deep breath, and gave a slight nod. "Good morning. What can I get you today?" Daniel looked up, and this time his gaze lingered. "Just a black coffee. No sugar." And he hesitated. "I feel like I've seen you somewhere before." Sophie's heart felt like it dropped out of her chest. This was it. The line she had imagined 1,000 times, yet hearing it now felt like a needle piercing straight through her. She gave a polite, professional smile. "I've worked here for 5 years. You might have seen me around." Daniel nodded slowly, but his piercing blue eyes stayed on her like they were trying to reach past her calm exterior, searching for something familiar. 5 years. Huh, that's impressive. Not many people last that long in service jobs like this. Not everyone gets to choose to leave. She blurted out, then quickly covered it with a forced smile. "I'll bring your coffee right out." She turned and walked briskly back to the counter, her chest burning like fire. He had looked, but he hadn't seen. He had asked, but he hadn't remembered. And she, was holding a secret that could change his entire life. Daniel stayed longer this time. He wasn't in a hurry like the day before. He read the newspaper, or rather, pretended to. Now and then, he looked up, his gaze as if trying to piece together fragments of a forgotten memory. Behind the counter, Denise glanced at Sophie with suspicion. "Are you okay?" "No," Sophie said honestly for the first time in years. "But I have to be." That evening, when she got home, she found Liam sitting on the living room floor, a small box open in front of him. A box she had hidden behind the wardrobe, not locked, but never expected him to find. "What are you doing?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Liam startled, quickly covering a photograph. An old photo, two kids in their early 20s, lying on the beach, laughing without a care, her with purple hair and a mischievous smile, and Daniel younger, freer, eyes untouched by the weight of wealth and responsibility. "This is my dad, isn't it?" Liam asked, his voice barely a whisper. Sophie sat down, too tired to run anymore. "Yes," she admitted. "And I saw him," Liam added quietly, "where I've seen him in articles, online, in tech magazines, and today I saw him walk into the cafe." Sophie said nothing. "Mum," Liam looked at her, "if he's my dad, why hasn't he ever come looking for me?" Sophie closed her eyes. That question wasn't meant for her. It was the question of a boy aimed at the man sitting at table number 7, who thought he was just sipping coffee, unaware that his real life was about to begin. Saturday, 10:14 a.m. In a small room where sunlight streamed through a worn window, Liam Alvarez sat cross-legged on the floor. In front of him was a cardboard box, old and faded by time once kept. He had quietly taken the box from behind his mother's wardrobe. He opened the lid, his heart pounding at what he saw inside. A whole world his mother had never told him about. Inside were yellowed photographs, torn notebook pages, a soft plastic hospital bracelet from a newborn's wrist, and at the very bottom, that photograph, the one he had only glimpsed yesterday. His mum looking younger, her hair dyed purple, her eyes full of sunlight, and the man beside her brown hair, a slanted smile, one arm around her shoulder like the whole world was safe in that one embrace. Liam flipped the photo over. The handwriting in blue ink had faded, but it was still legible. Daniel and Sophie, La Jolla, summer 2013. He swallowed hard. Daniel. Liam quietly picked up his phone and opened the browser. He didn't know the man's full name, but he knew he had to try. First search, Daniel La Jolla, summer 2013, no results. Try again, Daniel San Diego Tech, CEO. Then Daniel Whitmore Global. And then a headline popped up from an article last year. Tech mogul Daniel Whitmore announces $5 million grant to Children's Hospital. He tapped the image. A clear photo appeared. Daniel in a black suit, standing at a podium. Liam whispered, almost afraid to breathe. It's him. Those eyes. That smile. And that face was the grown-up version of his own. He didn't need a DNA test. He knew. Seconds later, another article caught his attention, an upcoming event for the Whitmore Foundation Spring Education Benefit, Friday at the Bayside Convention Center. He glanced at the calendar. Next Friday. The event required an invitation. He didn't have one. But Liam wasn't the kind of kid who backed down easily. Jake will know what to do. He texted his best friend, Jake Patterson, the kid who could hack into school Wi-Fi blindfolded and sneak into concerts without ever being caught. Liam typed, "Charity Gala. He'll be there. I need in." On the other side of the screen, Jake replied with just 3 words, "I got you." That night, Sophie had no idea her son was quietly planning his first meeting with the man whose name he had only just learned. It wasn't about money, it wasn't about fame. It was because for the first time in his life, he had seen his own face reflected in someone else's. Liam didn't want to wait until Mum was ready. He needed to know. He needed to hear the man say it. "You're my son." Or worse, "I never knew you existed." Whatever the answer might be, Liam was ready to face it. He folded the photograph, slid it between the pages of a textbook, and tucked it safely away. Then he sat in front of the mirror, took a deep breath, and for the first time in his life, looked himself in the eyes and said, "I deserve to know where I come from. And I will find the truth, no matter what it takes." Wednesday, 6:27 p.m. Sophie was cooking dinner when she heard quick footsteps coming from Liam's room. She turned just in time to see him slip something into his backpack, too fast for it to be just homework. "What are you doing?" she asked, eyes following every move. "Nothing. Mum," Liam replied with a grin, but the way he looked away, the exaggerated shrug, said everything. Sophie narrowed her eyes. Liam. Silence. Then a sigh. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket and handed it to her. It was a printed email. Subject line, "Congratulations, you are a finalist in the Whitmore Foundation STEM grant program." She devoured every word. Her heart sank into her stomach. What is this? An invitation to the Whitmore Foundation's charity gala. "They picked me as a finalist," Liam said, eyes glowing like the sun. "You never even applied for this," Sophie snapped, her voice sharp as a blade. "I think maybe Mr. Garcia submitted it for me. He said my wind turbine project had real potential." "No!" She cut in, her voice shaking. "This isn't a coincidence. This is a trap." "A trap?" Liam blinked. "Don't you see the Whitmore Foundation? It's his. Daniel's. They're inviting you, publicly, in front of the media, to turn you into something they can control." Liam furrowed his brows. "You're talking about my dad? About Daniel Whitmore?" She froze. That question, that admission had come sooner than she was prepared for, and this time there was no way around it. "Yes," she said softly, "he's your father." Liam didn't yell, didn't cry. He just looked at her as if trying to understand something vast and invisible. "Why didn't you ever tell me I had the right to know?" "Because I wanted to protect you," Sophie said, pulling out a chair and sinking into it, her voice nearly breaking. "I went to find him. When I was pregnant with you, I was stopped at the gate. A woman came out elegant, cold, and said Daniel didn't want to know anything about me, or you. She handed me a check. I tore it up on the spot." "Was she his mother?" Sophie nodded. "Evelyn Whitmore." Liam sat in silence, his lips pressed into a hard line. After a while, he whispered, "So, he really never knew." Sophie bit her lip. Maybe he stayed silent. I don't know. But what I do know is this: that world, the Whitmore world, is not a safe place for you." "I don't need safe," Liam said, rising to his feet, his voice louder than ever before. "I need the truth. I need to know why he left, why I grew up without a father, why every time my friends talked about their dads, all I could do was fake a smile." "Liam," Sophie called out, but he had already turned away. "I'm going to that gala, whether you approve or not." "No," she stood up sharply. "I can't let you get hurt again." Liam turned back, his eyes blazing, his voice low, cutting. "I've already been hurt, Mum, by your silence, by the times you said, 'You'll understand when you're older.' Well, I don't want someday anymore. I want now." He left the kitchen, leaving Sophie frozen, shaken, as if she'd just walked through a storm she hadn't prepared for. That night, Sophie sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. Her phone buzzed a message from Denise. "Is everything okay?" The Whitmore Foundation just released the official guest list for the gala. Your name and Liam's are both on it. Then another message. "Do you know who's behind this?" Sophie didn't need to guess. It was Evelyn. They were playing the same game again, just like 12 years ago. But this time, the pawn wasn't a frightened young girl with trembling hands and a growing belly. This time, it was a mother. And if they wanted to touch Liam, they'd have to get through her first. Thursday night, 9:37 p.m. In the small apartment tucked within a quiet neighborhood, the lights had long since gone dark. But in the living room, Sophie's lamp still glowed. She sat at the dining table, her hand resting on a thick cardstock invitation. Her son's name printed in bold, elegant type, Liam Alvarez, finalist, Whitmore Foundation. STEM Gala. Sophie still remembered how it felt walking through the gates of the Whitmore estate 12 years ago. The shame, the fury, the pain of realizing that the child in her womb had been treated as a problem to be quietly erased. And now, that same family was inviting Liam onto a stage, only this time the spotlight would be blinding, and the media would circle like wolves. Was it truly to honor her son, or was it to unmask the child they once tried to hide, to use him as a strategic pawn in a public relations war? The bedroom door creaked open. Liam stepped out, wearing a wrinkled t-shirt and sweatpants, his hair messy like it was on any other night before bed. But his eyes, they held the quiet weight of a decision already made. "You're still awake?" he asked softly. "Yeah," Sophie replied. I've been thinking about tomorrow. Liam sat across from her. A few seconds of silence passed. Then he asked in a whisper, "If tomorrow I really do meet him, will you be mad at me?" Sophie looked up, straight into his eyes. "No, Liam, I won't be mad. I'm just afraid. Afraid of what you're about to walk into. Afraid he'll reject me. No, afraid you'll get hurt in a way I can't protect you from this time." Liam looked down. His fingers tapped gently on the wooden table. "You've always said I look like Dad, but I don't want to just look like him. I want to know who I really am. What part of me came from him, and what part came from you?" Sophie nodded slowly. "You deserve to know all of it." Silence again. Outside. The wind whispered through the cracked window, the curtain shifting gently in its breath. Then Sophie sighed. "If you're going to the gala tomorrow, I'm going with you." Liam looked up. His eyes lit up with surprise and hope. "Really? Really? If you're determined to face the truth, then I won't let you do it alone." Liam let out a breath, clearly relieved. "I asked Mr. Jake to pretend to be my guardian, but I swear, Mum, if you had said no, I still would have snuck in." Sophie burst out laughing for the first time in days. "Liam Alvarez, you've definitely inherited the Whitmore family's stubborn streak." He laughed too, then his face turned serious again. "Mum, if he asks, are you going to tell him the truth about me? About you? About what really happened?" Sophie looked at her son, a blend of aching tenderness and quiet pride filling her chest. He wasn't the little boy who used to build Lego spaceships anymore. He was someone searching for his origin and brave enough to face it. "I don't know how Daniel will react. I don't know if tomorrow will change anything." She stood up, stepped toward him, and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "But I promise you this tomorrow. I'll tell him everything. No more hiding, no more fear, no more silence for the sake of the past." Liam nodded. Then, "Whatever happens, we've already won, haven't we?" Sophie smiled softly. "Yes, because from this moment on, you won't be fighting alone anymore." That night, while Liam slept peacefully, Sophie sat by the window, typing a note into her phone, a promise for tomorrow not to seek revenge, not to spark scandal, but simply so my son can see himself fully, so he knows he wasn't abandoned, he was hidden, and that the truth, though buried, can never be erased. She saved the note, turned off the screen, and for the first time in years, drifted into sleep without carrying the weight of old shadows. Because tomorrow, the sun would rise, and everything would change. Friday, 6:02 p.m. The Bayside Convention Center shimmered in the elegance of a grand evening. Under crystal chandeliers, designer gowns flowed through polite laughter, and sparkling champagne flutes raised in the hands of prestigious donors. At the far end of the grand hall, a wall of white orchids framed golden lettering that read, "Whitmore Foundation, Spring Education Benefit." Daniel Whitmore, dressed in a sharp black tuxedo, was reviewing the final version of his speech on his phone. But his mind wasn't focused. One name kept echoing inside his head. Simmons. Andrea Simmons. The waitress at Café Soleil. The woman whose eyes made him feel as if he was staring at something he once had and had lost. And the boy Liam Simmons, about to be announced on stage as the winner of the STEM competition. Daniel. His mother's voice came from behind him, sweet and cold. As always, remember, tonight is about family image. Daniel turned to see Evelyn Whitmore, draped in an olive silk gown, pearls glowing at her neck, her eyes as calculating as ever, like she knew things before he even had time to think them. I haven't forgotten. And you'll keep everything under control. No surprises, no emotions. Daniel pressed his lips together and nodded, but inside, something was stirring. He couldn't shake the feeling that something tonight was going to break wide open. Outside in the grand lobby, Sophie gripped Liam's hand as they approached the check-in desk. Liam wore a deep blue suit, his tie slightly crooked, hair slicked back awkwardly, but his eyes, they burned with quiet fire and unshakable purpose. We can still turn back, if you want to, Sophie whispered. Liam shook his head. No, I want to face the truth, whatever it is. Sophie nodded. Then we face it together. They stepped into the main hall. Immediately, heads turned. Some recognized Sophie. Others saw something else, the undeniable resemblance between the boy beside her and the man standing near the stage. 7:01 p.m. The lights dimmed. The event coordinator walked onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to an evening celebrating the bright minds of tomorrow, young visionaries bringing new hope to education and innovation. Applause echoed, cameras flashed like lightning, and to begin our ceremony tonight, please welcome the chairman of the Whitmore Foundation, Mr. Daniel Whitmore. Daniel stepped up. Each footfall felt like walking through fog. He took the microphone, his voice steady, composed. Thank you all for being here tonight. For 12 years, the Whitmore Foundation has been committed to investing in the future, not just through numbers, but through people, children bold enough to think differently and brave enough to change the world. He looked out at the audience and suddenly, his eyes stopped. There, a boy with piercing blue eyes, and beside him, a woman with a face that pulled at something deep in his memory. Daniel's heart skipped. The first award in this year's STEM category goes to a renewable energy project designed by a 12-year-old innovator. Congratulations to Liam Simmons. The spotlight swiveled, landing directly on Sophie's table. Liam stood, all heads turned. Sophie gripped the edge of her chair. The boy made his way to the stage, each step carrying 1,000 unanswered questions. Daniel extended his hand. Liam reached out and took it. For a split second, 2 generations of Whitmore stood face to face. One knew the truth, the other did not yet. Congratulations, young man, Daniel said warmly. Would you like to say a few words? Liam nodded. Sophie's heart nearly exploded in her chest. He took the microphone. His voice trembled slightly, but was clear. "Thank you for this award. But there's something I need to say. I didn't just come here for my project. I came here because I'm standing next to my father." The room fell dead silent. Daniel froze. He turned slowly toward the boy. Sophie shot to her feet, and all around them cameras flashed like fireworks. "My name is Liam Simmons," the boy said, his voice trembling, eyes shimmering with tears. "My mum is Sophie Alvarez, and I was born on January 15th, 12 years ago. You're my father, even if you didn't know. Until now." The entire ballroom erupted in gasps, murmurs, and stunned whispers, 1,000 headlines beginning to write themselves in real time. Daniel stood frozen, his face pale as paper. At the far end of the hall, Evelyn Whitmore gripped the back of her chair, her gaze sharp enough to set the room on fire. The storm had officially begun. The air shattered like glass. Flashes fired in all directions. The elite guests whispered furiously, phones buzzing non-stop in trembling hands. Backstage, event organizers scrambled in chaos, scrambling to contain what was quickly becoming the most unprecedented moment in gala history. At the center of it all, Liam stood firm beside Daniel, still clutching the microphone. Those unmistakable blue eyes, identical to his father's, were brimming with tears, but didn't blink. Daniel couldn't move. The boy's final words, "You're my father," played on a loop in his mind like a glitching tape. From the audience, Sophie pushed through the crowd, her steps fast and certain, ascending the stage like a mother pulling her child from a storm. "Liam, let's go." But Liam shook his head. "I need to hear it. Just one thing. Did you know about me?" Daniel swallowed hard. He looked at Sophie, then turned back to Liam. "No," he said, his voice cracked and raw. "I never knew." From the side of the stage, a chillingly composed voice cut through the tension. "That's enough." Evelyn Whitmore emerged from the shadows, pearls gleaming under the spotlight, her face carved in stone. "This is a farce," she said, voice calm but razor-sharp. "We will handle this matter immediately." "No." Daniel's voice rang out firm, for the first time all night. "We're not handling anything. We're talking. Right now." He motioned to the security staff at the side of the stage. "Keep the backstage door open." Then he turned to Liam, his voice gentler now. "Go with your mum. We need to talk. Just us." Liam looked at Sophie, silently asking for permission. She gave a small nod. "Go. I'll be right behind you." A small meeting room backstage. The door closed behind them. Only 4 remained: Daniel, Sophie, Liam, and Evelyn. Daniel paced the floor, as if trying to breathe in a room where the oxygen had just been stolen. "Let's start," he said, turning to face his mother. "I want to know, did you really know?" Evelyn sat down, calmly smoothing her dress, and replied, "You're being manipulated by a woman who exploited your teenage emotions to climb higher. And this child, Daniel cut in, pointing to Liam, "is my son. And I'm asking you, Mother, did you know he existed? 3 seconds of silence. Then Evelyn answered, her voice colder than stone. "Yes, I knew." Sophie reached for Liam's hand. He tensed, but didn't pull away. Daniel turned his face, as if he'd just been slapped. "And you never told me you were planning your future." "Daniel," Evelyn replied, still cloaked in the logic of a strategist, "I did what was necessary." "Necessary?" Daniel roared. "You think it was necessary to let me live 12 years without knowing I had a son I paid her to disappear?" Evelyn said coolly, her eyes never leaving Sophie. But unfortunately, she didn't keep her word. Sophie stood abruptly. "I kept my word. I disappeared from his life. I raised our son alone. I didn't ask for his name. I didn't ask for his money. I just lived. And tonight, my son is the one who came looking for his father." Liam's voice cracked as he spoke. "I don't want money. I don't care about the name. I just need to know, why didn't you ever look for me?" Daniel stepped closer to him, then knelt down, his eyes full of tears. "Because I didn't know. Because your grandmother made your mother believe I abandoned you both. Because I was a victim too." Liam broke into tears. Sophie pulled him into her arms, and Daniel sat back silently, his knuckles whitening around the arm of the chair. Evelyn stood and walked toward the door. "Please don't turn this into a media circus." "Too late," Daniel said quietly, without looking at her. "The cameras caught everything." She paused. Her final glance at Liam, neither soft nor harsh, was laced with a strange bitterness. "The boy has your eyes, and that is already enough trouble." The door slammed shut behind her, and in that small room, 3 broken pieces remained, facing the chance to either heal or shatter forever. Saturday, 9:12 a.m. The sun rose earlier than usual over San Diego, but inside Daniel Whitmore's mind, it was still as dark as the night before. He sat motionless in his office on the 52nd floor of Whitmore Global. The leather chair had never felt so unforgiving. In front of him, on the desk, a small chestnut-colored wooden box, worn, unlocked, but inside was a doorway to a past he had never been allowed to enter. "Mr. Whitmore," came the gentle, low voice of Mrs. Herrera as she placed the wooden box on his desk. "I kept these for the past 12 years. Daniel looked up at the housekeeper who had served the Whitmore family since his grandfather's time. She had watched him grow up, and she had also witnessed the day Andrea Simmons, the girl he had once loved, stood at the gates of the estate, pregnant and tear-streaked, denied even the chance to knock. "You knew?" Daniel asked, his voice no longer sharp like the night before, just tired. Mrs. Herrera nodded slowly. Mrs. Evelyn ordered all the letters, calls, and messages from her to be destroyed. But I couldn't do it. Why? Because I saw the desperation in her eyes, and because I've been a mother too. Daniel opened the box. Inside, a stack of handwritten letters, each one tied neatly with a silver ribbon. He carefully undid the ribbon, his hands trembling. The first letter, Daniel. I've called dozens of times. I went to your house, but the guard said you weren't there. I don't understand. Please, call me. The third letter, I have something important to tell you. I'm pregnant. I don't want you to panic. We can get through this together. The final letter written in pale blue ink. The words smudged by tears. If you truly want nothing to do with me or the baby, then at least say it to me once. Don't let our child grow up not knowing where he came from. I don't want your money. I just need to hear that what we had was real. Daniel froze. He brought the letter to his nose, inhaling the faded scent of old paper as if it could prove something had once truly existed. He didn't cry. He didn't rage. All he felt was one thing. He had spent 12 years becoming the most successful man in the public eye, but the biggest failure as a father. 11. 04 A.M. Sophie's apartment door opened. She startled at the sight of Daniel standing there, his face drawn, a wooden box clutched in his arms. I found them, he said, without pretense. The letters, all of them. Sophie stood still. A part of her had always believed. He would deny it. But Daniel's eyes, they held nothing left to hide. You read them. I read every word. I know the truth now. And the most painful part isn't that my mother betrayed me. It's that I wasn't there when our son was born. Silence. She stepped aside. Let him in. Liam wasn't home away on a school trip with his STEM club. Daniel placed the box on the table. Everything's here. You can read them again if you want, but I don't think you need to. You lived them. Alone. Sophie looked at him, and for the first time in 12 years her eyes weren't filled with anger. Only exhaustion finally letting go. I used to think you chose to leave, and I used to think you chose to disappear. Turns out, we were both written out by someone else. Daniel nodded, then took a deep breath. I can't change the years we lost, but if you'll let me, I want to begin today. I want to learn how to be a father, Daniel said. Not with money, not with appearances, but with time, presence, and even my mistakes. Sophie let out a soft laugh. If you really believe being a dad means learning from your mistakes, then welcome to reality. They both laughed, not a perfect laugh, but enough to soften the cracks between them. That afternoon, Daniel sent his first message to his son Liam. I read the letters your mum wrote. I'm sorry for all the years you had to grow up without me. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I just hope we can start again, if you'll let me. On the other side, just minutes later, I think, we could start by fixing the turbine together. The gears jammed, and I'm not good with talk. Maybe you are. Daniel chuckled. For the first time in years, his laughter wasn't about a signed deal or rising stock price. It was because a kid had just called him maybe you in a message that felt unsure, but full of hope. Sunday, 3:41 p.m. In the little apartment Sophie once called our two-person base camp, there was now a third person, A man crouched beside a messy homework table, scattered with plastic parts and misaligned gears. Daniel Whitmore, CEO of one of the largest tech companies in America, was reassembling a miniature wind turbine with his son. No assistants, no PowerPoint slides, no shareholders, just a tiny screwdriver, 3 off-center gears, and a 12-year-old boy talking like a pint-sized engineer. "Do you know why I used aluminum alloy instead of plastic?" Liam asked, eyes sparkling. Daniel smiled and wiped his hands. "Because it's lighter, because it resists rust, and because my old man can probably get better materials for the next prototype." Daniel laughed out loud. "My old man, huh? Dad still sounds weird." Liam shrugged. "But I'm working on it." Sophie stood at the doorway, a cup of warm tea in hand. She didn't interrupt. She just watched. And for the first time, she saw the two of them share more than just eyes or smiles. They shared passion, focus, joy. She remembered all those nights gluing models together alone, pretending to understand complicated formulas just so her son would know she was there. But now someone was here who truly understood, someone who could ask Liam about blade efficiency or aerodynamic structure and make the boy's heart open like never before. That evening, the three of them had dinner for the first time. No fancy restaurant, no private chef. Just spaghetti Sophie made, a simple salad, and a piece of toast burned slightly at the edge. Liam talked more than usual. He told stories about school, how his best friend Jake thought Daniel looked like Tony Stark without the suit. Daniel laughed, then looked at Sophie. "Should I be flattered or offended? Maybe both," she replied, lips tight but eyes glowing. After dinner, while Sophie did the dishes, Daniel and Liam sat on the balcony. The wind was soft. Streetlights flickered gold outside. A quiet evening, but to Daniel, it felt like a silent miracle. "Dad," Liam said, fiddling with the small turbine model in his lap. "Yeah, if I hadn't gone up on that stage, would you have ever known the truth?" Daniel didn't answer right away. The question wasn't sharp. It didn't carry blame. It was just filled with longing. Daniel looked at his son, a boy still so young, yet carrying a heart brave enough to break anyone's silence. "I don't know," he said quietly. "Maybe not. And that thought scares me more than anything I've ever faced in a boardroom." Liam nodded slowly. After a moment, he asked again, his voice light as air, but hitting Daniel like a knot in the throat. "Are you proud that I'm your son?" Daniel turned fully toward him, placing both hands on Liam's shoulders, his voice thick. "I'm proud beyond words. So proud I can't believe I get to be this lucky. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me, even though I did nothing to deserve it." Liam looked down, and when he looked back up, there were no more questions in his eyes. Only trust for the first time that he had not been left behind. Inside the kitchen, Sophie wiped her hands, standing quietly in the doorway. She didn't step in. She didn't interrupt, because she knew this moment belonged to the two of them. But her heart, for the first time in years, finally let go. She wasn't the only one carrying the weight anymore. She wasn't the only one who had to be strong. She was no longer alone. And Liam would no longer grow up with silent gaps and invisible names. When love doesn't arrive on time, but arrives just in time. 3 months later, La Jolla Cove. The place where it all began, waves kissing the pale sand. Where two lives once diverged. Now, they stood side by side again. Daniel stood barefoot in the warm sand beside Sophie, hand gently holding the one he lost for 12 years now, real, now present, ahead of them. Liam ran across the shore, a surfboard in hand, his life vest bouncing as he shouted, "Dad, Mum, I caught a wave." They laughed. Not because it was a perfect ride, but because there was a child growing up with two people behind him, ready to catch him if he fell. That same morning, the ribbon cutting for the new Whitmore Foundation headquarters took place, simple but meaningful. The building was powered by a green energy system, inspired by Liam's wind turbine model. He was the one who cut the ribbon, standing between his mom and dad. The plaque at the entrance read, "Whitmore Foundation, Center for Second Chances, for single parents, for the children once overlooked, for anyone ready to begin again from wherever they are, backstage." Sophie watched her son's beaming face on the TV monitor. Daniel stepped up beside her, gently straightening her collar without thinking, like a reflex. "We did it," he said softly. Sophie nodded. But Liam, he's the one who led the way. That evening, there was no gala, no press, no flashing lights, just pizza, a round of Uno, and the sound of laughter filling their little apartment. When Daniel got up to clean, Liam leaned against Sophie's shoulder and whispered, "Mom, if you hadn't been so patient, I don't think I'd have this life today." She stroked his hair. "It wasn't patience, sweetheart. It's just, you were worth the wait." That weekend, just before bedtime, Liam placed his hand over his father's and whispered, "I know you came late, but I also know you're not leaving again." "Right." Daniel didn't answer immediately. He simply squeezed his son's hand firm enough to say it all. "I came late, but I'm staying for good." Out on the balcony, Sophie stood watching the city lights flicker on. The wind moved gently through her hair, but she no longer felt like the lonely mother of yesterday. Now she was a woman who had walked through pain and chose forgiveness. Not because the past deserved it, but because the future did. And the most beautiful truth, even when love doesn't come on time, it can still arrive to the right people, right on time. If you've ever felt forgotten, maybe it's because someone's still finding their way back. And sometimes, truth comes late. But love, if it's real, always finds its way home.